Welcome, Miami. It has been so wonderful being here over the past couple days, spending time with each and every one of you and getting to know you better. Thank you for making a place and a space for us to talk about sport diplomacy, and how we have used all of those skills, talents, and abilities to continue to further our lives and have a conversation with you all. At the intersection of innovation, leadership, and global impact, that is where sport has always lived. For this conversation, we're going to look at how innovation, discipline, and diplomacy continues to fuel the next generation of change makers. I'm honored to kick off this conversation with one of my childhood friends and Olympic teammates. He is an investor, he's a change maker, and he is a visionary leader, Apolo. Apolo, you've worn many hats: athlete, author, entrepreneur, and investor, and you've done it with intention and integrity. What inner strength or mindset carried you from the Olympic podium to the world of innovation and impact?
Well, I think first off, Sally mentioned that we're childhood friends. So true story, Sally and I both grew up just south of Seattle. I've known Sally for 12 years, literally was like a neighbor for many years. And then when I was in the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, getting food from the cafeteria, I hear this yell of my name, Apolo. I turn around and it's Sally, who was then competing in women's wrestling and went on to have an incredible career. So it's pretty amazing how different now the stage is set. We're both retired from sport, talking about a whole new set of challenges and opportunities, especially in this day and era. So I'm grateful to spend time with all of you here in Miami, and obviously with you, Sally. But to your question, intention, integrity, how do you transfer post-career from the sporting world into the world of entrepreneurship and innovation? I think a lot of it was a tremendous amount of failing. Olympic athletes particularly don't have an identity until they leave the sport. So our entire subscription of who we are, what we do, the guardrails of this is what you should be doing, this is the affirmations of where you get your strength and your resilience, and this is your purpose in life, is from the coaches, from the teammates, from the training program, the fans, and the results on the scoreboard. And when you decide to retire, all of that goes flat. And now you're in a place where you're trying to vie for who am I, what do I want to do, what passions, skill sets, interests do I have, what impact, what tribe am I a part of in this world? Because before it was all about Team USA and achieving your best to go and try to win medals for your country. And now it is, how can I cultivate that same psychology of resilience and strength into a new arena? And so it was a lot of failures. It was a ton of saying yes to as many things as I possibly can, and a lot of understanding which direction that I wanted to go in. And so whether it was real estate, metals and mining, digital assets, venture, and now investing into consumer-facing products, really mainly on the health and wellness side, I needed to have a deeper internal conversation around what's really important to me. How do I want to play that role and impact? I have all of the tools and resources available to me living in the best country in the world. How do I cultivate the same Olympic level champion mentality and psychology, impart that upon young founders who I first meet, who maybe don't watch sports, and they don't know what kind of challenges both externally they will face and then internally. And that's the role I think that I play in today, whether it's consulting in the corporate environment and try to get people to think like a corporate athlete, and developing strategies and mechanisms so that they can show up as their best self and battle the internal noise of our mind.
When you're talking about going into a particular venture, or as you go through various chapters of your life, how do you go about defining what your why is, and how do you stay grounded in that?
I think our why, at least for me, tends to change at multiple times throughout our life, right? Whether it's your faith, whether it is your business, whether it is your family, and then having the why somehow intrinsically tied to the skill set that you've developed over these years. The reality is that many of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis don't feel like they are intrinsically tied to our deep actual why as a human being. And I think that's okay. It doesn't have to be. I think in the way that you operate as a human being on this planet, the way you operate in business, you're trying to do the right thing. You're showing up as your best self. You're realizing that the world is imperfect and people have stuff that they bring to the table that may get a reaction or a response, whether it's defensive, out of you during an argument, during a negotiation. And I think it's up to us to self-govern our own speedometer as we show up in the workspace. Whether you are an investor, whether you are someone who is a founder, capital allocator, whether you're an ops, whether you're an engineer, all these different mechanisms, you still have to govern the internal model, which is your mind, your heart, your spirit. And I think if you can create that alignment, that's how you really excel at the fastest speed possible. So identifying the why, I think it can be as so simple as, how does this tie into the overall reaching theme of how this thing that I'm doing, this business that I'm trying to accomplish, this exit, this sale, this deal, this sales process, whatever it is, how do I tie that to the overreaching goal, which is my entire process here is to spend more time with my family, to get closer to my faith, to understand that I'm doing something for a greater good outside of myself. And at the end of the day, when you look in the mirror, whether you're someone who is deeply dissatisfied with who you see, at the end of the day, I can relate to that immensely, or this fear of failure, perhaps that you're operating within, and then slowly chipping away at this process so that you can look in the mirror, feel satisfied and happy with who you've become, and also eager for what is in the roads ahead.
I agree. And I think one of the things that we've both been able to witness and have for a lived experience is that when you're in pursuit of a goal, there is so much noise that can come in. How do you balance finding that strength in being disciplined, which is a superpower, in an environment where there is technology that is coming at us, there's opportunities that come at us? How can you build How do you build your focus, and how do you recommend other people can do that so that they can stay grounded and stay on task and in alignment with where they're going?
I think that's a great question. So I can relate this to sport. There's an extremely high correlation between the highest performing athletes in the world, the most dangerous sports in the world, even high performers in our servicemen and servicewomen, the military, et cetera. When there is a severe consequence for not being able to show up and perform, it's also a high correlation to being in flow state.
Yep.
Because you care so much about an outcome, and there is a very severe response or consequence if you do not show up and perform and execute your task appropriately. Don't receive a gold medal, whatever the psychological pain that is. If you're in the military, obviously the result is much more devastating. So I think if we can understand that maintaining focus, which is a superpower, removing the noise, all of that means just getting into flow state for as long as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. And it is a muscle. It is to be trained. Obviously, some people get into flow state. For those of you who are not familiar, it's this optimal state. If I was going to give you an example, this is like Neo from the Matrix when he's dodging these bullets. Everything seems to slow down, and you're in this very beautiful state where it's easy, you're fluid, and it's just the natural movement, doing something perhaps that isn't natural. And if you've ever been on a sales side call and you're selling, you know what that feels like. You're getting all green lights. You're just winning. If you're in a negotiation, you have empathy, but you're also, you're just moving with this dynamism. And so athletes spend decades of their life at literally a race perhaps that's like 40 seconds long. So in my weird, obscure sport of short track speed skating, some of our races last 40 seconds long. And we train a decade for this one moment in time in which we want to show up with the American flag around us and we want to go and win. And in that moment, the difference between first place, receiving the gold medal, being celebrated on the cover of Wheaties boxes, hearing the national anthem being played, and being in fourth place is literally like in that clap, 4 people have just crossed the finish line. So we start to really pay attention to routines, habits, behaviors leading up to those 4-year cycles of every Olympic Games. We reverse engineer the process. Year 3, year 2, year 1, month 1, week 1, day 1. What do I need to do tomorrow before noon in order to achieve these minor incremental improvements that can compound over time? So by the time I show up in Olympic Games in 4 years, I am my best self because the margin of error is so thin. All of that correlates to visualization, mental preparation, and just setting the bubble around yourself where, and I can probably assume, I don't have kids, but I can assume for those of you that have kids, there is an immense purpose and responsibility to those kids. And I can imagine also, having my dad just left this morning, he was telling me, when I had you, all of the other stuff that I thought was important no longer became important. And so when I spent time doing the stuff that I cared about, I was really in it, and I was there. And I really used this timetable to maximize my output during that time. So the same thing with the athletes and with many of you. I think the key here is, if your mind, this high performance mechanism is like a light switch, what are the techniques and strategies that you can implement on a day-to-day basis, because this is a consistency theme, this doesn't happen overnight, to where you can get into your mode of your most optimal flow state, where you are performing at the highest echelons of awareness, performance, and being able to process information. And this is a combination, in my belief, that is not just purely, the mind is obviously the most powerful asset we have on the planet, but still in between here is governed by a lot of other mechanisms. And so if I was going to simplify this in a way, and I was talking about this backstage a bit, think about your life and the way you create performance as 4 pillars that are health related, right? And these are the table legs on a table: how you sleep, how you eat, how you move, and how you think. Obviously, how you sleep, we know the implications and impact there. It's the highest performance mechanism regulating tool we have. But there's days where you're not going to sleep well, right? How do you eat? How do you fuel yourself with the right types of nutrients? Your body is still a vessel that operates differently depending on the types of macro and micronutrients it is assimilating. How you move, we know exercise is important. We know that man and women were designed to walk at least, or move our bodies in some capacity. And then how you think, this is probably a newer concept post-2020, really, which is how you operate in your social environments, right? Emerge America's like this organization. What's happening is you're opening up these new neural pathways when you're interacting in person, creating relationships, seeing old friends, forging new ones. This is the stuff that actually creates really powerful new pathways in your mind. But not only that, which is when you look in the mirror and you see who you are, what do you think about? Are you dissatisfied? Are you sad? Are you disgusted? I can relate to all of those, right? It's never enough, operating from a state of fear or failure. And how do we govern all of those pillars, those 4 pillars, those foundational pillars for health, is actually the fastest way you can get into flow state. And it's not about perfection. It's actually all about progress in each of those 4 areas. And anyone here who is hungry to grow and learn, it's just about monitoring those little areas, because all of us have that grinding mentality. All of us have this driving force, this purpose that we want to keep going and pushing, but we're still a machine that has to be somewhat keeping tabs on. So that's my spiel on how do you regulate, how do you understand that these 4 pillars are integral to you showing up as your best self, and then training this as if you would anything else. And this takes mind and consistency, because you've got 30 or 40 years of previous hard wiring that you have to break that cycle in behavior. And as we know, behavior is one of the most difficult things to change about our human experience. That's why January 1st New Year's resolutions never work. No one's holding you accountable. You forget about the importance and the sexiness of the idea, or vision boards, or whatever it might be. And these things typically fall off because there's no consequence with you not adhering to that action until there's a health scare, until there's loss financially, or something happened to a loved one. Then all of a sudden the high performance mechanism gets turned on because you care so immensely, because you now have felt the physical and psychological pain deeply, and that's what creates a man or woman on fire. Olympic athletes, those that are in the military, have just been able to figure out how to harness that in a different way. And I urge all of you to be able to tap into that, because we have a finite amount of time on the planet. We don't have an infinite lifespan.
And speaking of how we, thank you. And speaking of how we can tap into different skill sets and really start to build different opportunities, we have the upcoming Men's FIFA World Cup that will be here in Miami 2026. We have the Summer Olympics that will be in Los Angeles 2028. We have the Winter Olympics that will be in Salt Lake City, Utah 2032. And when we look at that, we know that sport is more than competition. It's an opportunity to build bridges with different cultures. It's an opportunity to share our world with those visitors that are going to be coming here to Miami, Los Angeles, and Utah. What opportunities for sport diplomacy are going to be opening up with athletes like yourselves, like we used to be, that are now going to be wearing all the uniforms from not just the United States of America, but from all the other countries as they come here? And how do we start to build bridges and move forward with alignment?
I think it's a great question. So as many people who watch sports know, and many of you may have different opinions, the first thing that people say typically when we're given a questionnaire about an opening ceremony that's going to be hosted perhaps in LA is, what do you want? What is the most prioritized things you want as a part of the opening ceremony? And what do you not want to prioritize? And everyone always says, what do you not want to prioritize is politics. They never want the athletes to serve as a vessel and a means. The reality, as we know, is just a little bit different, because athletes are representative of all of the culture that is every country. And we know this goes back to the 1980 hockey team.
That's right.
The Miracle on Ice, to Eric Heiden competing. You know, my first Olympic experience, I was 19 years old. It was, 6 months plus post 9/11. My first Olympic Games was in 2002 in Salt Lake City. And I was a young kid from Seattle, didn't know up from down. I was the reigning world champion, world record holder. And I remember thinking that this was all about my time to win, all about my chance at winning gold medal for my name, for my family. And as the opening ceremony occurs, every contingent, Team USA, Team China, Team South Korea, Team, the Great Britain, Team Holland, they all walk with their contingent, with their country. And they're announced into the opening ceremonies by name. And the very last, because we are the host country, is announced the United States of America. And as we're walking into the stadium, I remember back then, it was a very uncertain time. People were unsure if we should even be hosting these Olympic Games because they didn't know if there was sleeper agents that are on the ground going to create another attack. There was just a lot of uncertainty and chaos. And the energy in the air you could feel it was thick. But there's also this optimism and this Olympianism, symbolism of what it represents to be a part of an Olympic team, to show up as your best self, as a unit. And there was special forces on top of rooftops with their night vision goggles, because these opening ceremonies are being held at night. And as we walk into the opening ceremony, there's this eruption of celebration of all the local volunteers, the thousands of people who were not getting paid, who wanted to be a part of the Olympic Games. They wanted their kids, their family members to see what it feels like to participate in some capacity and have some semblance of tangible access to these athletes in this entire event that was happening. And I remember as I was walking in and I was seated, they brought in one of the flags that was being flown all around the country. And one of the flags was from the World Trade Centers, or the area in New York. And it was tattered and it was torn. And some of the teammates that I was going to be competing with alongside were also walking out carrying this flag. And this was a really unique moment for me as a young 19-year-old, having come into this Olympic Games thinking everything was about me. And it was at this moment where I finally realized and recognized that I went from me to we.
Yep.
And this was the most beautiful shift that I didn't know that was feasible and possible that occurred. And there was this entire camaraderie. There was this unification of a country that we all had different belief systems. We had different faiths. We come from different backgrounds, different social economic statuses, whatever they were. None of that, all that was then noise. And what was so beautiful about these games was that it created this beautiful spiral of strength around those that were watching. And we were now rooting and cheering for Team USA. Now, how that relates to everyone who goes and watches these Olympic Games, the most widely watched sports in the world, is it is the reflection of the best of who we are, not just in sport. It's cultural reflection. It is historical reflection. It is optimization of the highest form and echelons of athletic performance reflection. And it's this beautiful thing where we come together and we cheer and we watch these athletes play for 2 weeks long. And so the embodiment of what the symbolism is for sport, I think, gives us a breather And the world goes on. We still have our challenges, we have our problems, we have our conflicts, we have our disagreements. But at least for that period of time, it is a chance for every country to come to the table and represent the best of what they have, and at least put the other stuff aside, because we're still floating on this, this big rock through space.
As we close this conversation, I just want to bring it back that sport is more than competition. It teaches people how to own their space, their voice, their body, how to see the end result before it's happened yet so they can live into the future that they aspire to be in. Sport it's a connector. It brings people together. Here at eMERGE, this is a connector. It brings people together. And it's because we're going to be working together moving forward, it allows us the beauty of building community that is both tangible and real, but also aspirational over the what ifs. This is where technology meets impact, and this is all of our moment to lead with purpose. Each and every one of you are Olympic athletes in mind, body, and spirit. There is always a team behind the team, and the honor and the privilege of a lifetime is that when you build your team and you walk alongside those individuals, that's when you're going to exceed, because what we can say with absolute certainty is that at the end of the rainbow, the medals around your neck don't define you. They show you what you're capable of. And each and every one of you, as you take on your careers, whether it's through health, defense, technology, investing, there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if you want to get there. Thank you very much for having us. It was an ultimate pleasure.
Thank you.